Welcome to the June business meeting of the Mason District Land Use Committee.
Oh, Jesus.
The Mason District Land Use Committee is made up of fellow Mason District residents. The committee considers all non-by-right land use applications, including rezonings, comprehensive plan amendments, special exceptions, etc. Generally, following 2 meetings, the committee will make a land use recommendation to the Mason District Planning Commissioner, Julie Stranley, who regularly attends our meetings. Tonight we have 1 item on the agenda, a decision on the application 2232-M16-22 as submitted by the Public-Private Partnership Branch of the Department of Public Works and Environmental Services to temporarily relocate a public facility, the Bailey's Crossroads Homeless Shelter, to county-owned property co-located adjacent to the Lincolnia Senior Center. At the outset, I would like to make a few comments about how tonight's meeting will run, and then Commissioner Stranley will make a comment. As I just mentioned, the committee hears land use matters, and as we have had to point out on many other occasions pertaining to land use applications submitted by private developers, it is not the committee's role to weigh in on whether or not a new drugstore is needed or whether a better location could be found for a new office building. The same is true for this application. We are not here to decide if it is a good idea or bad idea to temporarily relocate the homeless shelter or whether a different site should have been selected. DPWES, after reviewing more than 22 sites, determined that this is the best location available for a temporary shelter and filed the application we will vote on tonight. The committee's sole focus on which we must base our decision is whether or not the application is in substantial accord with the area's comprehensive plan. At our May meeting, Chris Caperton, Chief of the Facilities Planning Branch, Fairfax County Department of Planning and Zoning, briefed us all on how the 2232 process works under Virginia Code Section 15.2.2232. Then, DPWES presented its application, followed by a lengthy response from the Stop the Shelter group. We also heard from advocates for the homeless and a few members of the community. Due to the lengthy agenda and the timing of the presentations, the committee did not have the opportunity to ask questions at that meeting. Subsequent to the meeting, committee members submitted a long list of questions to the county. The questions and the county's responses are posted on the dedicated project website. In addition, the Department of Planning and Zoning staff report is now posted on the dedicated website and linked from the Planning Commission website under the July 20th hearing date. 1 item still outstanding is the apparent discrepancy in the crime statistics as provided by the county and the crime statistics provided by the community. Tonight we will hear from Captain Quinn, the Mason District Commander, about this topic. At the same time, we must keep in mind that reconciling the crime statistics has no bearing on the decision regarding conformance with the comprehensive plan and our decision. Rather, this information will help the county, the nonprofit service provider, and the community improve services and conditions within the shelter to ensure the shelter is a good neighbor, regardless of where it is located. Following Captain Quinn's presentation, the committee may have questions for various stakeholders. Following the committee's questions, I will open up the discussion to members of the audience, keeping in mind that we do still have the 10 p.m. curfew. The supervisor's office has confirmed that the 10 p.m. curfew is a hard and fast rule due to custodial logistics. At the time I open up to the community, I will remind you about our rules for comments, and finally, I will request a motion on the application. The handout provided shows an estimated meeting timeline. We'll see how that works. And when it gets time for community questions, individuals will have 3 minutes each to speak, and representatives of HOAs and community associations and other groups will have 5 minutes each. We'll have a line starting on that side of the room, and a microphone will be provided at that time. A couple other comments there. One of the questions that kept coming up was, how the county, there's apparently an APA report out there that indicates that the best practice for this type of facility is to have a 25-foot buffer, 2,500-foot buffer between the facility and any other residential use or other use. Commissioner Stranley has talked to the APA and clarified some of their points on that issue. Commissioner Stranley.
Thank you, Dan. The report that everyone has been citing is a study of social services, and there is a provision in there that discusses an ordinance in Green Bay, Wisconsin at 2,500 feet. And that has been cited as an APA best practice. That is not an APA best practice at all. That's an example of an ordinance in another area of the country. And Fairfax County staff also looked into this. I personally called the American Planning Association, and sent them a copy of the letter and asked them to research it to tell me what to cite their best practice according to what was in the letter. No such best practice exists. That is not a best practice. That was simply an ordinance from Green Bay, Wisconsin. So we just want to clarify that and get that off the table. Tomorrow night at the Planning Commission, we will have another 2232 on the temporary relocation of the fire station, in case anyone is interested in that. And this matter is scheduled to be before the Planning Commission on July 20th. So thank you very much.
Okay, Chris, are you ready to go?
Hi, good evening. I'm Chris Caperton with the Department of Planning and Zoning, and I'm joined by David Stinson, who's the project manager for the 2232 report that's been published. I'm going to be very brief in my remarks and then turn it over to David. Oh, I'm sorry. So, just a couple of comments. The planning process exists to serve the public interest, and we can debate the public interest both in principle and in specific application, and that's good. That's a healthy debate to have. But as planners, we have to conscientiously hold to those principles and actions that best serve the entire community. Part of that process involves being honest and open and transparent. And I would hope that any citizens that had dealings with the Department of Planning and Zoning through this process found us to be honest and transparent in our sharing of information. And as you can see in the report that's been published, we sort of lay out all the comments that we received from the various agencies that we asked to review and take a look at this proposed action. The report consolidates those comments, and then we put together from that a recommendation. And our recommendation is that this proposed facility meets the criteria of location, character, and extent in the comprehensive plan. We're glad to answer questions. I don't want to hold up any more time for future questions from you, the board, the Land Use Committee, or the citizens. So let me turn it over to David Stinson, who will just briefly go over the high points of the staff report and follow up with any questions. Thank you.
All right, I'll briefly go over the points of the location, character, and extent from the staff report. The location of the proposed facility is the recreational field behind the Lincolnia Senior Center, identified on the comprehensive plan map as public facilities, governmental, and institutional use. Recommendations for this site by the comprehensive plan state retain the Lincolnia Senior Center for public facilities use and in public ownership for school, local, community, and recreational use. This proposed facility is considered a public use and is in conformance with the comprehensive plan. The proposed facility will occupy approximately 60% of the field behind the senior center, while 40% will remain open for recreational use. Additionally, the site is zoned R3, which permits the temporary shelter, which is considered a public use according to the zoning ordinance. The proposed temporary shelter will be accessible by vehicle from the parking lot of the Lincolnia Senior Center, which is accessible from North Chambliss Street, and it will not require any additional access points. The location is also accessible by transit as multiple bus lines serve the area. Moving on to the character, the proposed temporary shelter will consist of a one-story, 5,922 square foot modular building, 18 feet in height. It will be served by 24 parking spaces. To the south, towards the remaining portion of the athletic field, the proposed temporary shelter will be screened by a board-on-board fence. To the north, between the Charleston Square neighborhood and the proposed facility, it will be screened by a board-on-board fence as well as transitional screening. There's an existing chain link fence to the west that will remain, and a new chain link fence to the east between the senior center and the proposed facility will be installed. And this will create a physical barrier around the temporary shelter. And moving on to the extent, there will be some impacts to the immediate area, but the impacts from this proposal are not expected to be adverse. The proposed temporary The proposed shelter will be staffed 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, with an average of 8 daytime and 2 nighttime staff members. The facility will also have 46 beds for residents. Vehicular traffic from the temporary shelter is not expected to create adverse impacts on the surrounding area. There are an average of 20 vehicle trips per 24-hour period at the existing Bailey's Crossroads Community Shelter. And the proposed temporary shelter is not expected to generate more vehicular trips than the existing shelter. Most residents will access the temporary shelter by foot or transit, and in response, a new and enhanced pedestrian connections are planned between North Chambliss Street and the proposed facility. The proposed temporary shelter is not expected to have adverse impacts on environment, noise, light, water, or air quality of adjacent residents. The proposed temporary shelter will offer a secure and controlled environment for its residents and the surrounding community. Perimeter fencing around the facility will keep shelter-related activities within the shelter area. The site will have lighting that complies with the zoning ordinance and will be monitored by cameras for the protection of its residents and the surrounding community. And there will also be staff and volunteer support there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for the residents. Once a permanent location is secured for the shelter, the temporary shelter will be removed and the recreation field will be restored. The senior center may choose to retain 12 out of the 24 spaces created for the shelter, but these 12 spaces will be a benefit for the senior center and will also provide parking for members of the community to access the recreational field.
Thank you, David.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, David. All right, why don't we, we'll go ahead and move on to Captain Quinn. And circle back around.
Good evening.
Good evening.
So I understand there's a lot of interest in the crime statistics. For those that haven't met me, I'm Christian Quinn. I'm the commander of the Mason District Station here. Yes, ma'am. My apologies. So I brought with me, in the interest of giving you the best data that we have, a couple subject matter experts, Captain Dean Lay, who serves as the commander of the Planning and Research Bureau, and Ms. Annie Thompson, the program manager for our crime analysis program. So they will actually speak to specific numbers, and if there's questions regarding the technical meaning of things or how we arrive at data, they'll be able to answer that best.
Thank you. I'm going to sit down and have a better reference for the report. What I'm going to outline here are some generalities. I think if you go on the Chief's webpage right now, you'll see crime statistics, and then when you open that up, it'll be populated with current data. And every day, the data changes. So when we look at it internally, what an officer or a supervisor approves today will be in the system subsequent to that entry. So what I'm saying is today, we can show like 67 cases, and then maybe the next day it'll show 72. And you'll see what I mean when I go here. First, I'm going to give police statistics for Bailey's Crossroads Community Shelter for the first quarter. That'll be 3525 Moncure Avenue. As it stands for first quarter, There's 67 police responses for that address. Now, what does that mean? 21 are considered Group A. And I think Captain Quinn addressed what a Group A offense is and what a Group B offense is. Just for, okay,
Please review.
I will. That was my segue. A Group A offense, as defined by the National Incident-Based Reporting System, as well as the IBR, which we use in Virginia as we report to the FBI. Crimes against person. A Group A offense typically will be crimes against persons to include assaults, homicide, kidnapping, sex offenses, and other related cases like that. Crimes against property can be arson, bribery, burglary, embezzlement, counterfeiting, blackmail, fraud, larceny, motor vehicle theft, robbery, and stolen property. Some of it sounds redundant, but there's a reason. Crimes against society, that'll include 5 categories: drug and narcotics offenses, gambling, pornography, prostitution, and weapon violations. Group B are less than that. These are typically, say, drunken publics, loitering, littering, and stuff like that. So, for the first quarter, is 21 Group A offenses for that actually location. 72 for the subcensus. Now, what is a subcensus? A subcensus is a geographical, what we call geospatial analysis, a geographical footprint of that area that bases it on calls for service. Can you hear me? I don't want to get too close. Calls for service as well as geographical locations to determine what we would consider a subcensus. Now, the majority of those 72, actually, that's updated from there, is assault, larceny, and drug. At that location were 12 drunken publics, but for that subcensus are 27. Now, to give you an example, we also consider a larger piece of those subcensus tracts to be a patrol area. In that patrol area, there's 1,072 Group A offenses. And that's for the existing location that I'm talking about now. But to give you a comparison yet again, for the entire Mason district, there's 850 total drunken publics that has been made by officers in the patrol district.
Sir,
Yes.
I'm sorry. I think a little too simple for this.
Annie, get ready.
This
Come on up.
This is really going over my head.
Okay, well, I'm going to get
in a big way.
Okay.
One of the questions I submitted. Well, I submitted a general question. Could the police be here? And what I'm hoping to understand is, so I take my community, Overlook, part of Mason District. We have some residents that do bad things. We have some people that come into our community and do bad things. And those are two different things. So what I'm trying to understand from a land use perspective is what happens to be coincidence. You know, the current shelter is maybe in an area that is wonderful, crime-free, or the current shelter is in an area that is in a bad area where a lot of other stuff happens not because of the people that live in that shelter. So what I'm trying to understand from a land use perspective is what is cause and effect? Is the crime that happens at the current location happenstance because the shelter is in a largely crime, and forgive me for not being very articulate, but is any crime happening in that area regardless of who lives at that address, or is it being caused by the people at that address? And secondly, if regardless of where a temporary shelter goes, with one of 22 sites, which we don't know the other 21, what is your best professional estimate? Is any potential crime happenstance because it's where this temporary shelter happens to be, or is it caused because of the tenants, because of what comes and goes in and around of a homeless shelter?
To use a comparison, and I'll go back to some of the statistics. For instance, I'm going to go back to drunk in Publix. I'm going to use, he's asking me if it was any typical building that was built there, would the statistics be the same? And that's an analysis, a predictability analysis that I'm going to answer this way. So first quarter, as I said, there's been 12 drunk in Publix. So you can say 12 times 4, and that's going to give you a math for the year. But considering for the entire Mason district, there's actually 850. So that location is a very small blip on the analyst. But you look at 850 and you can compare it. So are you saying that 12 drunk in Publix for one particular location is high?
Can you make that in per capita terms? Because 850 for how many people, it's hard to put it in
Right.
context.
What do you have, 100? What's it, where's Kristen at? How many, population for Mason is 105,884? That's what I have. I don't know if that's...
So that's not much of a comparison, right? So, I mean, is there any way to compare an area similar to the size of the Bailey's shelter where you have the 12 drunk in public? Is there some sort of comparable area that you could say, here's how many drunk in publics were in a comparable area?
We have two other shelters that we've compared to Eleanor.
Not shelters, just other neighborhoods with similar numbers of people in them.
Yeah.
If you're looking at the neighborhoods based on population, you have to have all of those neighborhoods listed. And then you'd have to, I would hate to say select one neighborhood over another because you got to look at your underlying factors. What are some of the underlying factors for one neighborhood compared to another? It's just like one neighborhood in the northern area of the county, even if it had 104,000, is going to be a lot different than another neighborhood with the same number of folks in the south. So you can't just look at the size as being the comparable thing. You have to also look at some of your underlying factors. What types of things are they near? Is something near a mall? Is something near a college, a university? Near an area where you've got wooded area, you've got your wood lines. So those are the other things that you have to start looking at if you're trying to do an actual comparison.
Right, I appreciate that. It's just like comparables for real estate.
Exactly.
But is there any way that you could say, okay, let's just jump over here, nearby, similar size neighborhood, you know, maybe with some malls and other similar whatever. I mean, I don't know if you can do that off the top of your head and say...
Not off the top of my head. And see,
Well-
that would be something if someone, like, if you identified some areas that you wanted to do comparisons to, that's where we could actually do a side-by-side. But without knowing what neighborhoods to compare it to, you don't want to mix apples and oranges.
Let me ask you this. Maybe it's too fuzzy, but... You know, if I told you there were 12 drunk in public incidents in an area of a certain size, would you say, wow, that's a lot, or that's kind of typical for many neighborhoods of
No,
a certain
I wouldn't
size?
say that was a lot at all, because if I'm looking at, for instance, if you look at Mason and how large Mason is, and then you look at the population and you look at 12 of that, that's very small. And I know we're not talking about the area where I originally came from, back in Florida. When you start looking at your population piled on top of very small areas versus spread out areas, then the activity starts to balance itself out. Not that any crime is acceptable, but I'm saying if you've got 12 in a population of 104,000, and basically what you would do if you were trying to do that per 100,000, you would take that 12 divided by that 104,000 and then multiply that by 100,000 to get your rate per capita for that area. So it's not going to be a whole lot.
Yeah, but I think what we're trying to do is just simplify it in a fairly simple question instead, you know, so what are the regions we're talking about? Right now, there is a homeless shelter in the Bailey's Crossroads area. Part of the question is, what is the crime in that area? And the second part of it is, how much of that crime perhaps is caused by the homeless people there?
Or what the homeless shelter may attract.
Correct.
I'm going to pass this.
So then, because the real question here is, now this homeless shelter is coming over to this area, to Lincolnia area. So one, you know, would that be transferable? And then the second part of that question is, there's a senior
Right.
The senior citizens place, and that's a vulnerable population. Are they more at risk or no? I mean, so it's those two areas that we're kind of looking at.
Does that as I give this to Captain Quinn to answer part of that, looking at the current area where the shelter's at now is Group A offenses, just to give you right on your point, both of you gentlemen, 1,702 Group A offenses. Now I've already reviewed Group A. Now I'm going to look at where the shelter could go, and that's 1,200 Group A offenses. So again, 1,072 where it's at, looking at the entire neighborhood, and then 1,200.
Is that the sub-census level, the block group level?
Yes, that's sub-census.
Okay, do you mind if we just keep going with
Yeah.
this? Okay, so,
But he's going to ask a part two of the question about the senior center. That was a question that hasn't been answered yet.
Go ahead and clarify for me exactly what was asked, because I myself am listening and got lost in the numbers there.
Yeah, so to try to keep it simple, so you've got the current area around Bailey's Crossroads, what's the current crime there, and how much of it perhaps is attributable to the homeless shelter or, by virtue of having the homeless shelter there. And then if that homeless shelter is moved to Lincolnia, then the comparison of current crime and how much of the crime might be resulting from the transfer of the shelter here. And then the second part of that question is, then there's the senior citizen center, and what's the vulnerability of those people to perhaps the homeless population? That's kind of a unique aspect of this.
Well, I would say that the best way to look at data on that, data being the most objective intel you can have, would be to look at the total subcensus, because that answers your question of what's going on in that area. So when I say a subcensus, that's more of the address you're talking about and everything immediately around that. A patrol area is obviously broader. So the best way to look at that would be to look at the single address and then look for, basically the best way to put it would be disproportionate clusters. Is it that all the crime in the subcensus is happening immediately around the location, or is it relatively dispersed within the subcensus?
and can you answer that question?
No, but I would imagine Ms. Thompson, looking at the data that they got with them, should be able to elaborate on that.
There aren't defined clusters, it's spread out. That's what I'm saying. Just because you have that shelter in that area, it doesn't mean all of the stuff is there at the shelter. When you start looking at the sub-census, it's spread out throughout the sub-census. Yes, sir.
Is the Captain Quinn, is the current shelter at Bailey's Crossroad in your district?
Yes, sir.
What is your professional reaction to potentially moving it next door to the senior center?
That's a really broad question, but I'll sum it up with this. I think that we have to be particularly attentive to things that have and looking at the data. We don't track data by every single person we come in contact and say, did you come from there? Do you have anything to do with this address? Are you yourself homeless? We're not tracking data that way. So looking at it, just objectively looking at where things are occurring, I would be particularly mindful of watching for alcohol-related things, and then we know that seniors are at greater risk of general crime anyway. Notably, we track the fraud offenses particularly, so we're particularly mindful of our seniors as a vulnerable population anyway. And that's not to point the finger at any kind of facility that services the homeless and say, well, that's going to immediately bring in victimization of the seniors. It's just something we would be mindful of. And then with respect to looking at the data, knowing what I know about my district, my concern would be things that are alcohol related because of the clustering in that general area. But again, I'm not looking at it saying, we don't track data and say, did you just come from there? Did you drink here? Did you come from that building? Are you headed to that building? It's where it specifically is. So I'm looking at it as, how much more do we have at a given address or immediately right around that address?
So follow-on question. So I hear a part of what you're saying, and please correct me if I'm mistaken, is you pay particular attention, or some additional particular attention to seniors as being vulnerable to crimes such as fraud. If that's not correct, please correct me if I'm wrong. My follow-on question is, does the homeless population, are they more likely to be victims of crime, regardless of where they happen to be?
I would say homeless persons are more vulnerable as well. Many of them have other underlying issues, mental illness, things like that. By the nature of the fact that they're sort of disenfranchised or less likely to call the police if they are victimized. So I'd say the homeless population themselves are a vulnerable populace.
Can I ask another question?
Yeah, sure.
I'm sorry, did you want to go ahead?
Well, I can go ahead. That brings me to the overall question of the demographics of the population at the shelter. I mean, many times, very good people who work every day hit a bad patch and become homeless for a short period of time. And I think the days that are there are something like 67 or 47 days. So we can't assume that everybody that is at a homeless shelter is a potential problem. Sometimes they're very good people, they work all day, they could be our neighbors that hit a bad patch. So how does that, I mean, the demographic feed into all these statistics? Because not everyone's going to be a problem.
It's true.
Well, I think the other thing is we as the police department are really not privy to the folks that are at the shelter that are not having issues. We would have, by the nature of our role, we tend to get called if there is an issue. So I think it would be more appropriate for someone from shelter staff or within another county entity to speak to the demographics as to who's being serviced there.
Are we having that?
Captain Quinn, on the FAQ for the county, they list emergency calls.
Hold on. We'll open it up for community questions later. Sherry.
Okay, so I believe you started with saying that there were 21 Group A crimes sort of specific to Bailey's shelter in the first quarter. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
But then you went on, I couldn't keep up with a very long list of what Group A crimes are, and some of them were quite significant.
Yes, and
So
normally it takes a semester to get it down.
Yeah, so I think maybe it would be helpful if you or whoever here
Sure.
could talk in a little more detail about what those 21 crimes consisted of and who they were against, and just to flesh that out. Is it less alarming than it sounded
It
at
is.
first?
It is. It's not kidnapping and hijacking.
Yeah, not homicide.
Okay,
Yeah.
let's hear more.
The majority were theft, larceny, and drugs.
But were these 21 in the Bailey's Crossroads area, or were they related to the shelter?
The 21 is directly connected to the shelter, and I think when you were asking me about the substances, that's combined for a patrol area, so I misspoke. It's just not that substances when I was referring to the 72.
And excuse me, but like say theft, for instance, might be a homeless person having something stolen from them.
Being a victim.
Exactly.
Being a
They can
victim.
be the victim.
If you call the police department, as soon as you call the police department, this information is tracked. So even in times when the police department doesn't respond because the person says, I'm making a report, but I don't want someone to come out, it'll still be tracked under this data here.
I want
Yeah.
one point for clarification too. If you go by your total calls for service, which can always be very misleading because you might get calls that come in, but then by the time an officer responds to it, by the time an actual report is taken, it may not even be a crime at all. It might be something civil. It might just be a discipline. So those don't get counted. Those don't get tracked. So your calls for service can be high on the front end, but when you actually start looking at the data for what actually occurred, that can be low, because then you're talking about the reports that are going to actually be into the system, and there's a physical report assigned to that report with the case number. And a lot of times when people hear calls for service, and it's everything. It could be something when an officer is driving by and he might even see something suspicious and he stops. That's going to be a call for service, and it's going to be attributed to that location or that area. But if you're talking about a pure report where a crime actually occurred, a report was written, a case number was assigned. Those are what we call the crimes that actually occurred, and those numbers are going to be lower than your calls for service.
And to be transparent, if you would like, I'll give you the entire list, being it's only 21.
Yeah, tell us more about it. I think everybody would be interested, or at least
You
some.
separate them by whether the call, this was
Don't you think that's just?
The question is, do we rank them by victim and perpetrator? And we do. In fact, to do a full transparent research, we would want to take each report and go through the narrative. Because although the title says one thing, the narrative, is just Ms. Thompson just said, could be completely different, a little bit different. So here we go. For the first quarter, counting January, February, March, is 11 assaults. Counterfeiting, to include forgery, 1. Damage of personal property, 2. Drugs, 5. Larceny, either victim or suspect.
Sorry, what is larceny?
Larceny could mean I had my wallet when I went to sleep and I woke up and it's gone.
Somebody stole something out of your car?
Forgery could mean I had a credit card and now someone's down at the mall and they just signed for some products. So I think I left off with larceny was 2, and again that brings that grand total up to 21.
And I want to, on the assaults, an assault could actually be classified as somebody walking up to you saying, I'm going to slap you, which is a simple assault, but it still goes under the assault offenses.
So can you tell us any more about those? Like how many of those might have just been people at the shelter fighting with
No,
each
because
other?
it's with it being the Group A offense, assaults are grouped into one. If we were going to start breaking them out individually, then we'd have to do what we call a category breakdown. And then you'd have, your list would be a lot longer because assaults literally can have about 10 or 11 different things that fall into that one category.
Just to compare drug offenses, for instance, for the substances comparison is 13, and then just as a refresher, it was 5 at the shelter. And the substances, again, is the area around the shelter. Any comments, Captain?
Pardon me, most of us back here cannot hear you.
Okay.
This is sound absorbing tile in here, and your microphone is either out here or over here or over here. Please.
Yep.
I'm getting like every 8th word.
Come sit right here. I apologize. I'm not a good microphone user. I need to go back to some more karaoke things that on my weekends. Sirs?
Did you want to tell us a little bit more about what you have prepared to say, or is it all just?
The only last thing I was going to put down there is for the response time, meaning that when you call the police to have an officer come to that location, for the area that the shelter is proposed, there you go, see, I already forgot, okay, is 3.7 minutes. And to, again, I use the word a lot here, but compare, the average response time for the Mason District is 6.1. And that's just an average. That counts running lights and siren to a more general response. I do want to add one thing. Annie, if you would, or Ms. Thompson, if you could explain how the citizens can go to the website and click on, and you can see crime in your area. There's a very interactive website we have. If you don't mind overviewing that.
You can actually go to the website. To actually get to the main website is www.fairfaxcounty.gov. And once you get there, you can navigate through the website and actually go to where neighborhood, and put that in and actually get the general statistics. Now, you're not going to get everything as far as some of the stuff that we can't release, but what's releasable to the public, you can go there and you can get that. There's also a phone number, so if you ever, go there, and a lot of times we get calls from people who need clarification on the data that they've seen there, or something that they've retrieved from there and they need a better explanation for it. You can call us and we can respond back to you. Between me, my Captain Quinn, and even the analyst that works that area, we'll be able to provide you with the response back. But once you go to the website, it's pretty interactive. You just kind of follow the prompts that it gives you.
So I got a real brass tacks, unpolitical question.
That'll be for Captain Quinn.
Yes, it is for Captain Quinn. In your professional opinion, do you think a homeless shelter creates crime? Do you think it attracts crime, or do you think it is neither here nor there, or something else?
And we get the same questions with hotels, certain hotels, bars,
Schools.
schools. Well, Captain Quinn's going to give the loud answer.
So I don't think a homeless shelter in and of itself creates crime, but it does bring a populace that has, that some members, there are folks who may be banned from the shelter, that they obviously would have nothing to do with the shelter, but they're drawn to the location because they know other people who are clients of the shelter, and them simply coming into the area can be an issue. But there's no way to specifically say like that's attributable to the shelter. I mean, it is, but it can't truly be controlled. It's neither here nor there, nor can it be measured or anticipated. I think that we have some issues in that area that are. I'm being mindful of how I say this.
Understand?
Because I'm trying to be very candid with you, but at the same time, I don't want to jump to an illogical conclusion either. But we have issues in and around that general area, and unfortunately, it's very difficult to say, hey, it's because of this or because of this. But looking solely at data, we have a lot of instances of drunken public. And when I say a lot, we can say like, well, 12's not that many. Well, 12 and a quarter in one specific location, for our estimation, that is disproportionate. And when you look at the IVR offenses, when you look at the sub-census versus single address, I think assault was 21 and specific address was 11. That's roughly over half. So we do look at those particular things very seriously, and we look at cause and effect. Now, was that a particularly bad quarter? Yeah, quarter one of 2016. The second quarter of the year is already considerably better. Now, we could say, hey, things have just calmed down, or the weather's changed, or we've upped our enforcement and that's suppressed it. I mean, that can be attributed to any number of things, or just left to chance, hey, things just got better. The last quarter of 2015 was a particularly busy quarter as well in that general area. So I don't know if that is answering your question to the best of my ability. It's very difficult to say, hey, this particular type of facility brings crime. It's kind of, does a bar bring crime? Does a casino bring crime? I know you always hear those arguments. I mean, invariably, if you bring anything, it's going to bring something with it. I think that...
Yeah, trust me, I get it. I'm just a few months ago removed from being president of my HOA, and we had a raft of overnight home robberies, people in the homes, and guess what? It was another resident of our community. Mm-hmm. So I get it, and I understand. As I worked with detectives, we're in the Franconia district on the police side. But I get why it's so difficult and why it's hot one quarter and why it's not the next. You catch the guy. I get it.
And I kind of asked this before, but I'll ask it again. I mean, it would be helpful if there were any way to say, okay, these 11 assaults were just maybe people at the shelter fighting with each other as opposed to hurting nearby people in homes or something? Or with drunk in public, I mean, was anyone hurt?
But it might not even be at the shelter.
Well, I thought the 11 was for the shelter.
For the address of the shelter, but remember, it might be somebody that came to the shelter that may not even be associated with the shelter.
Okay, well, can you put any meat on the bones? Can you say anything more about those assaults or anything that helps us understand how the neighborhoods are affected by a shelter?
I understand what you're saying, but typically, looking at something that way for this type of setting and this type of presentation for numbers, is not something that you would normally do. That's what we would consider one of those FOIA type things, where we'd have to go in and dig a little bit deeper. It takes a little bit more time, because that's not something that's just readily available, because that's looking at some of the quote-unquote aspects of the crime that's not typical for your actual crime stats. But it is something that could be done. It's just going to take a little bit more time, because then you start looking at the individual reports. But the thing to also remember too, that might have been what the report was classified in. Like the captain said, the minute you start looking at the narrative or looking at the particulars of the report, it could have just easily been, I'm going to slap you, but it's going to get categorized as an assault. So I don't know if that answers your question.
I think, ma'am, if it helps you at all, and again, it's probably more anecdotal than broken out, because we're not taking those 11 police reports and saying, let's look at all the facts and circumstances in each specific instance where an event was captured as having occurred. Generally, as the commander of this district, having an understanding of what goes on in my district, that your scenario of are people just being assaulted in the community, that's not what we're seeing. We're seeing either residents of the shelter who were the victim, or residents of the shelter who were victimized by another person at the shelter, or a fight or an argument that gets classified as an assault. That's typically what I would wager. If you broke out each of those instances, that's what you're going to see.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Captain Quinn. Captain, I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name.
Like,
Thank you, Ms. Thompson. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm going to open up questions for the committee to any of the other representatives that are here besides the police. We do have somebody from Community Revitalization. We have Mr. Stinson from Planning, Mr. Caperton, and Ms. Beecham from Neighborhood and Community Affairs. Sorry. So, anybody else have any questions that may not have been answered by the responses? Steve.
So is one of the questions I asked if someone from this could represent the senior center from the county. So there was a statement made at last month's meeting of this committee that the senior center would be on 24-hour lockdown if the temporary shelter was put in place next door. Can you please comment on if that is accurate, and in general, what is the senior center's perspective of a potential neighbor being a temporary homeless shelter?
There are no plans, nor have there ever been any plans for the senior center or the senior campus itself to be on lockdown. The senior center, there is a senior recreation center that falls under the Department of Neighborhood and Community Services. There also, within that senior campus, is an adult day health care program, as well as assisted living facility and independent living. Those two programs are run through the Department of Housing. The senior center itself, which will be in closest proximity, the entrance of it to where the folks will access the homeless shelter, it would not ever be on lockdown. It is a public government facility, and the swipe cards, which may have caused confusion, that would be a means for staff to enter and exit the facility only. But it would always be open to the public.
They would be on lockdown, that's what they said.
I apologize if that's what they said. That's incorrect.
Now, do you work at the
Hold on.
Who are you? Wait. Who are you?
I am Lisa Lewick, and I am the regional manager for the Department of Neighborhood and Community Services, and I manage the staff who run the senior center.
Your staff said that they would go through the response or
They will not.
They should. But that's
And I would be surprised, so.
Homeless are not homeless or anywhere else.
Yeah, but there are certainly no plans to lock down the facility at any time. In terms of actually, we've had the opportunity over time to meet with staff throughout the course of this project, and as it has continued to evolve. And one of the things that we reflected on is several years ago, probably a good 5 years ago, all the different programs areas from within the Lincolnia campus began coming together and doing a lot of joint activity and program planning. So there is a standing group within the facility that gathers to plan events, special field trips, activities, and so forth. That group will be continuing, and I think that should this temporary shelter come to fruition at Lincolnia, I think it would be wise of us to also invite participation by Northern Virginia Family Services, and in order to be able to incorporate some of that thinking and planning jointly with the shelter. Also, to that end, we have met a good 4 or 5 times with staff from throughout the facility, and had a very refreshing brainstorming session a couple meetings ago where they actually shared some wonderful joint programming ideas that they could collaborate with the shelter on. Things like either, there's a knitting program that is in existence at the senior center, knitting scarves, hats for the senior center. I'm responding to this question, thank you. And so we've talked about things like that, and we've also talked about opportunities for the shelter residents themselves to become engaged with the property through volunteer work and so forth. Also, there is nothing to preclude shelter residents who meet the eligibility criteria of the senior center to join the senior center, and we would welcome that.
So I assume that the rumors, let's say, of a lockdown arose because of concerns that someone from the homeless shelter might wander in, perhaps to cause mischief or whatever. So can you just address how you will make sure, if you're not having the doors locked, that you know who's in the shelter, whether they should be there, that sort of thing?
Sure.
I mean, not the shelter, but the senior center.
Sure. We, as a county agency with the Office of Prevention and Homelessness, have an ongoing collaboration and excellent working relationship with them, and they provide oversight to Northern Virginia Family Services, which would be responsible for staffing the center. We have talked about things like walkie-talkies on the campus to be able to communicate with one another. It's right outside the facility. So it's certainly something that I would envision that we would be partners with the shelter staff in ongoing collaboration with them. Similarly, there would be ongoing dialogue and collaboration with any security presence there. And I would be confident that while there may be issues early on, as folks get used to navigating that campus and recognizing the programs that they're supposed to go to, I would imagine that once we work through that it would be seamless.
My question is for the residents who live there now. Do they have some kind of a fob or swipe card to get in and out? Or are those doors just open for anyone? This is different now than the recreation center, which is public. But the people who live there, do they have any kind of swipe card, fob, or whatever to get into the premises, or is it just open?
I know that before I turn it over, I know the Adult Day Healthcare Program, because they have participants who could wander and so forth. That facility, they have stricter access and so forth. But I will turn it over. I will turn it over to Tony Clemens Porter, who oversees the assisted living and independent living, to speak to your question.
Okay, and so your question was regarding
the residents.
Okay, well, the Department of Housing, I'm the Director of Senior Housing and Assisted Living for our department, and I oversee that property among others. We basically, for that particular location, we have staff who man the front desk from early in the morning until 10 p.m. at night every day. And at 10 p.m. we lock the doors so that, and anyone who would like to enter the building, they can only enter by access from the nurse's station. So we have a way we can see them, whoever is at the door, and then they would allow them to come in. But that's basically after 10 p.m., the building is secured. Mm-hmm. And so anyone who wants to come to visit the particular location, they also may do so, but all of our visitors do check in at the front desk. They have to sign in order to come in and to visit at the location. So, we also, the building is staffed 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, because it is a licensed assisted living on the second floor. So there is staff there at all times.
All right.
Okay?
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank
Thank you.
Mhm.
Okay, we'll go ahead and open it up for community time. As I said, Commissioner Strandley?
I just wanted to ask a quick question. This past weekend, I attended the open house of the Lamb Center. It was in the Washington Post. It talked about how the city of Fairfax didn't want the homeless there, but now they embraced them. And there were 400 people there for the grand opening. It was amazing. And while I was there, someone wrote a check for $500,000 to pay off their mortgage. It was overwhelming community support. But my question goes back to while I was taking the tour, I was told repeatedly, this is what we do to be a good neighbor. This is what we're going to do to be a good neighbor. And I was wondering if there's anyone here from the county who can address how the shelter, if it is temporarily relocated to this location and continuing where it is right now. I believe there's some changes that you guys are contemplating, and I'd like to hear what those are.
Good evening. My name is Tom Barnett. I'm with the Office to Prevent Net Homelessness, the program manager there. As we mentioned, we do oversee. Okay. All right. Usually I'm told I'm eating the mic, and so I'm going to go ahead and speak very loudly so that everyone can hear. My name is Tom Barnett. I'm the program manager at the Fairfax County Office to Prevent Net Homelessness. It is extremely important that we, in the operation of all of our shelters, be good neighbors. And we have done that across the community in numerous shelters for 30 years. The Bailey's Crossroads shelter is one of several. The most recent shelter to be constructed was the Catherine Hanley Family Shelter in Fairfax, only a couple miles from the Fairfax County Government Center. As we mentioned before, we had an advisory council that included staff from the nonprofit organization, Shelter House, as well as county staff and residents of the neighboring community to discuss when the shelter was constructed, what's working, what's not working, how do we adapt services and operations in order to be a good neighbor. And so we are exploring ways of adapting our operations at the Bailey's Crossroads shelter and how it would be adapted there at the temporary location. That includes things like transportation, making sure that those individuals who want to go to appointments for job searches, can get to their appointments without having to rely only on public transportation. So we're exploring the use of vans, small buses. This is something that we do at other shelters as well. Another thought is that we will not, as a matter of rules, force clients to leave the shelter in the middle of the day. The intent in the past was to motivate people to go searching for jobs, searching for housing, but based on community feedback and what we think may be better ways to operate, we're letting people stay at the shelter during the day to get as much of the services that they need there on site, so that residents do not have to leave the shelter. They can if they need to for appointments, but we try to bring as much as we can to the shelter itself so they don't have to leave. So those are two examples of how we are listening and trying to be a good neighbor and good partner in the operation of the shelter, and we will be continuing to do that as we move through this process.
So what type of services do you provide that would, when the people stay there, that they take advantage of?
Sure. So some of the primary services are around health, both physical and mental health care. So we have visiting nurses from Fairfax County's health department as well as mental health specialists from the Fairfax Falls Church Community Services Board. We, of course, provide food, change of clothes, laundry, showers, as well as visitors, volunteers provide a variety of life skill workshops, everything from financial education, budgeting of that sort, as well as case management, where it's referrals to services that are available in the broader community, as well as, really most important when it comes to homelessness, housing location. So helping people understand what are their housing options in the community that meet their needs financially and employment, and how do you help people find and secure those housing? Many people don't understand what's needed, what are their rights and responsibilities as tenants, and so explaining those things is a core service that we provide in the shelter.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you, Tom.
Okay, as I said, we'll go ahead and open it up to some community questions. I would ask that anyone that wishes to speak, please line up over there by Chase, and we will give the HOAs, community associations, and other organized groups 5 minutes, and 3 minutes for any individuals that wish to speak. Okay, state your name and if you're representing the group, please.
Okay, my name is Debbie Fraser, and I'm representing Stonegate at Landmark. And I'm glad the opportunity came up to be good neighbors. I have been a neighbor of Fairfax County for 6 years. It's been a wonderful relationship with the senior center, and my community is very well connected to the senior center through that back lot, which if you look at the map, we have the sidewalk that leads to the recreation area. We also share a travel lane through that front parking lot. Those were all done through proffers. Our builder, Ryland, was made to improve those areas in order for them to develop where they developed. And the question I have, I really have to put all this paperwork down.
Yeah, go ahead.
I apologize. First of all, this particular 2232, I just want to draw your attention to it real quick, is false. It is on their third justification, but they still have not changed. On page 12, a picture of the entrance from the senior center into Stonegate. They're still showing it and advertising it as an entry to the shelter site through Shackelford Terrace. I'm asking publicly that be changed before this vote can go forward. That is a false statement. They've changed the justification 3 times. That's one of the things they changed in the paragraph, but they have neglected to change it in the application as a whole. Also, as far as the comprehensive plan goes, the comprehensive plan states that the Pinecrest sector is a largely developed and stable residential neighborhood. Infill development with this sector needs to be a compatible use, type, and intensity, in accordance with the guidance provided in the policy plan, land use objectives 8 and 14. 8 states, Fairfax County should encourage a land use pattern that protects, enhances, and or maintains stability in established residential neighborhoods. Protect and enhance existing neighborhoods by ensuring that infill development is of compatible use, density, and intensity. And that adverse impacts on public facility and transportation systems, the environment, and the surrounding community will not occur. I think we heard tonight there's going to be many impacts on this particular 2232. simply just want to add here is that if you are basing your decision this evening on the 2232 justification of the comprehensive plan, it does not match. There's a lot of questions that still need to be answered. I know you all received the staff report. The staff report has so many unanswered questions. This is a matter of slowing down, getting everyone's questions answered, and understanding the impact that this is going to have on a community that is already established with children, with playgrounds, with a senior center, with open communities. We have no fenced-off communities. We're all open. I am concerned with one of the things that you talked about, Captain Quinn talked about, where it's a lot of times what occurs in and around the area of shelters can be a problem. I'm in the area. My neighborhood and community is in the area. And I please ask for you to consider that when you make your decision. If you make your decision. Again, the 2232 is flawed. It still has wrong verbiage in it that needs to be changed. Thank you.
Let me just say, I know our chairman talked about a decision in his opening statements. We don't make a decision. We just make a recommendation.
Well, let me change it then when you make your recommendation. Thank you.
I'm Debbie Smith, Chair of the Mason District Council, and the MDC Board still contends that not moving the shelter to a permanent site first is both wasteful and disruptive. The other thing I'd like to say is I'd like to take note of a comment by Commissioner Stranley. She went to the Lamb Center opening, and she said that the shelter there, the center there, enjoyed overwhelming community support. I think that's absent in this proposed plan. Question for you all, for staff. Would like to know, what is the identified need for the homeless population in Lincolnia? And is that need greater than in any other part of Mason District? If so, how is that need determined? What were the other areas in Mason District with a need that were identified?
So if I heard the question correctly, it was, what is the need for the shelter in the Mason District? Is that correct? In the Lincolnia area, right, okay. So every year we do what's called a point-in-time count. This is a standard methodology practiced across the entire country, mandated by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. And this is a requirement for every community that receives federal dollars for homeless assistance. On our most recent point-in-time count, that was at the end of January of this year, we found 74 people were unsheltered. There were also an additional 200 people in the hypothermia prevention program. And those, for you who don't know, the hypothermia prevention program are shelter beds beyond what's normally available in the community. So different houses of worship, churches, mosques, synagogues open their doors, welcome people in to shelter them in additional. So that was 274 people that were either unsheltered or in shelter beds beyond our normal capacity. So just to answer your question, the need is great and the need for shelter is not met. So finding out where people come from is very difficult. People go to the shelter where it's located, right? People go to the shelter where it's located.
Thank you, Tom. Debbie, were you done? Okay, next.
Hi. First of all, I'd like to say I've worked at a homeless shelter almost every week in D.C. And what I find is probably 80% of the residents there, the people that go there, are no trouble at all. It's the 15 to 20% of the people that cause the problem. What my concern is do we have the statistics on how many crimes have been committed at the Lincolnia Center now? What is the crime rate at the Lincolnia Center now? I mean, maybe that's for the officers. How many calls do you get there in the first quarter of the year?
question?
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
Okay, you're asking me what is the proposed,
It says, what is the crime rate now at the Lincolnia Center?
yes, at the Lincolnia Center now, at the senior setting, oh, it's low, it's almost nil.
The other question, what my concern is the county is often, virtually everybody from the county that's spoken tonight has said this is going to be a temporary center, right? To me, that tells me that it's being shoved into a place because they don't have a permanent place. Right? So the decisions have been made quickly on this without a lot of input, or obviously you're working on some input, but without a lot of strategy or planning on if it's the right place to be or not. I'd be curious to know where the other 21 sites are and how long it took for them to rule out the other 21. That's my concern is how quickly they have done that. The other question I have is, the county keeps talking about this being a temporary center. Are you willing to put that in writing, that it will never be the permanent center? Can anybody answer that? Maybe it is somewhere in writing, but...
No, I think they addressed that on the FAQ. They said that they will not.
They will not put in a writing that will not become the permanent center.
That's correct.
Right. So that's why it makes me nervous.
But it's based on the fact that they don't have the legal authority to do that.
Right. Well, then I think it's pretty disingenuous for the county staff to say that there'll be no adverse effect. When they consistently say it's a temporary site, because for some reason they keep putting that across that it's only going to be temporary. But now they say that they're not going to put in writing that it's not going to be a permanent site.
Well, I think, Tom, can you address the size of the typical shelter in a county, and that this site would not even come close to that? Is that correct?
Hi, I'm Tracy Strunk with the Office of Community Revitalization, and as Dan mentioned, we're not able to write down on a piece of paper, yes, this will be a temporary site. There is no intention for the Lincolnia shelter site to be a permanent location. It's not. Sorry. I really should be addressing you all, I suppose. The size of the facility that we're able to put at the Lincolnia Center does not house all of the services. It does not do the things that we need to do, and OPEH could talk to that more if you want. But that it doesn't serve the purpose for it. It's not the desired location, and there is no intention to have it permanent in that location. I know people obviously have been concerned about not knowing every single site that was considered. Not all of, as we've said before, and we probably will say again, not all of those sites were sites that were talked to. Some of them are private land, some of them are public land. We've not talked to everyone about those. And we're still in negotiations, and we are moving forward as quickly as we can in terms of finding a permanent location. And we're having positive moving forward, and we don't want to do anything that would jeopardize finding a permanent location, and we'll give you all as much information as we can as soon as we can.
Thank you.
My name is Charlie Battaglia. I'm with the Homeowners Association here located nearby. As I understand it, the cost to build this temporary facility is in the amount of about $2 million. Is that correct? Does everybody understand that? And I'm just proposing that as an alternative for you to consider if you decide not to approve or recommend this thing. As I understand it, in working this agreement with the developer, that starting in March, that there'll be a penalty of about $1,500 a day if they're not moved out of this present site. Is that correct?
That's not correct.
That's not correct. Oh.
signed that yet.
And the lease, yeah, let me explain that piece of it so everyone understands. If you refer to the documents in the land swap agreement, the county's obligation is to, at the time they turn over title to their piece, the property has to be free of any tenancies or encumbrances. The March date is, and the penalty thing is only if the county and Avalon close prior to March, then the county would have to lease back the facility until March. But the county's only obligation is at the time they closed with Avalon.
Avalon is the present site?
Is the land swap.
Oh, yeah, development, that's right, yes.
That they just have to deliver that property free of any tenancy. So there's no specific time frame on when that has to happen.
So what happens in March if this is not ready yet for turnover?
Nothing.
There's no charges, no $1,500?
Absolutely nothing.
All right. In that case, I would withdraw my other question, which would have been, why not let it go into default? Because of the fact that if you took $1,500 a day times the amount of time that it would take 4 years at the present site, it would probably come out about even with the development of the site. The other thing I have is I served for a number of years on the Department of Veterans Affairs Advisory Committee on homelessness. And as you know, and about 6 years ago, they made a major change in their overall planning on this thing here. They went from about 300,000 people nationally of veterans in a homeless status. And they have now gotten it down to about 45,000 by changing their model. And a model that I hope you would consider. And that is to find housing immediately for each of these homeless people and not waiting several months down the line. Putting them in their own housing and then immediately putting them into a job location, and whereby after several months they are required to start paying for that shelter, for that apartment that they're in. I don't think you do that. And if you did that, you would eliminate the need, I think, for even a lot of the shelters that you got around in the county right now. Okay?
Thank you. Thank you.
I'd like to just
address. Yeah, go ahead.
Sir, thank you for serving on that committee. I am aware of the work that's happened there. I think what the gentleman was referring to is something called a housing first approach, and that is something that the Fairfax County Board of Supervisors adopted in 2008 as a fundamental principle guiding our 10-year plan to prevent and end homelessness. And since then, we have reallocated and invested millions of dollars in new resources in creating housing for people who are homeless. And we have shortened the length of time that people are experiencing homelessness, and we have increased dramatically the number of people that are moving to permanent housing straight from the shelter. What's most significant of all is that that same annual point-in-time count has been reduced 42% since the 10-year plan was adopted. And that is primarily because of that adoption of the plan and its housing-first approach. So I thought you were entitled to understanding how this community is trying to address homelessness.
Hi, my name is Jessica. I live in off Lincolnia Road. I actually lived there all my life, and I actually do also own a property right behind Landmark Plaza. And I just wanted to bring up a couple of things which I didn't hear addressed. So I don't know if many of you know this, but Lincolnia, that's on the border of Alexandria City. So I didn't hear any statistics on what the current Alexandria City Police already kind of knows what goes on in that area. But being on, I go to all the board meetings at the Mayflower, which is right off Armistead, right off Lincolnia pretty much. And I go and the police, Alexandria City Police, come and give updates monthly. And so I do hear a lot of instances where there is a lot of crime happening right off Beauregard. So is Fairfax County Police prepared to handle the crime or the loitering or the panhandling that's going to be coming in from that, pretty much over from Alexandria City. Also, I don't think we brought this to the attention of the people who live in those communities. Unfortunately for them, they're not part of Fairfax County. However, this is right in their backyard as well. I don't think we actually got that to them. I actually tried to give notice to them, but it was a little too late.
Yeah, the city, David, correct, you did, in the staff report, it does refer to some items from the city.
I sent a copy of the application. A copy of the 2232 application was sent to the city of Alexandria, and they did provide comments, which are in the staff report.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you were asking a lot for their honest opinion from the police officers, and I did mention it to the Alexandria police officer at that meeting, and he did say, be prepared, you will experience more crime, and they were, car theft, and they have a lot of issues with people hiding up in the laundry room. So there's a lot of apartment buildings near Lincolnia, not just townhouses, which I assume, but I don't think that's the case too much in other areas, but I just wanted to bring that up. Also, in addition to that, Lincolnia intersection is one of the worst intersections in Northern Virginia. So are we prepared to handle the additional panhandling that will be going on there? In addition, I know he had a lot of questions about will homeless shelters bring crime, bring drugs and things like that. There are numerous studies. I'm a researcher for health programs and labor programs, and actually used to work for Fairfax County, working with people who have mental health illness and so forth. So I'm very familiar with the population. So there are already numerous studies that cite that does bring a lot of this activity. And in addition to this, I don't think this was discussed, but there's also something called encampments. So a lot of people who go to homeless shelters might not have room to be in the homeless shelter, but they will make their homes outside around it, whether in the forest or, like I said, in a building, and so forth. So I didn't hear any of those instances addressed, but that might be a possibility as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Is Ms. Thompson still here? Or
Andy's got to take a flight.
okay. Well, Captain Lake, can you just address?
Yes.
The past speaker was talking about an increase in panhandling, studies that show that a homeless shelter may attract other types of crime, encampments, things of that nature. First of all, are we seeing those things at the current shelter location? And second of all, do you anticipate that they would be at the proposed site?
And I'll give this to Captain Quinn only because he's the commander for this district. But we are members of IACP, which is International Associations of Chief Police. So we could get that data possibly through academia. Studies on homeless shelters and crime.
So I know there was a couple questions there. One being, are we seeing encampments at the current location? We have seen those in the county, but the current location, we don't typically see those. And I think what we see, if anything, is more the vacant lots around there. We see periodic complaints for loitering, and then from some of the community members in the area that it's not recorded as a statistical thing because it's not necessarily a criminal offense, but a community complaint for folks in their neighborhood, that sort of thing. I'd say looking at the Lincolnia area, I've expressed concerns regarding the parking garage behind Landmark because we currently have issues periodically there with folks hanging out in that parking garage and doing things in there unrelated to the business at Landmark Plaza. And to the woman who just spoke's point, I did communicate with Alexandria City, and my analyst communicated with their analyst to ask for crime data, and this is real high-level general. Basically, the crime on our side right now, where that area of Fairfax County meets Alexandria City, relatively similar. We have more assaults, but they have more burglaries and robberies, and that's for comparable quarters. So it's kind of a pick your poison. I would say, generally speaking, the Fairfax County side is in better shape, but again, we're just looking at a quick snapshot. Overall, looking at it, it's relatively comparable in terms of what's there. The proposed site's about 350 yards away, and we do work concurrently with Alexander City now, simply because we have Landmark Plaza on the opposite side of 236. We've got, most people don't realize that the hotel and the IHOP, that's Alexandria City as well. So we work pretty well with them anyway, but the fact that the jurisdictional boundary is there does create some challenges. Does that answer all the questions that were asked?
There you go.
Carol Turner, concerned citizen, and I think it's really important that we hear from the residents quickly. I am going to hope that you guys are going to do the right thing and not recommend this, because it's stupid. I mean, why would you put a homeless shelter behind a senior center when nothing else is going on and it's incompatible? This I don't care if it goes along with the 2232. This is not compatible, and you guys must not recommend it, or I will lose all hope.
My name's Denise Bath. I penned the petition that many of you have signed. At our last meeting, I was told that petitions don't really matter, but I think the 650 plus people who signed that petition really do matter, and I thank you all for signing it. I've given all the committee here, I've given everybody a copy of everybody's names, and also we have 20 pages of comments from the citizens around here. Mostly what people say is, we have nothing against homeless people. We want to help the homeless people, okay? What our big rub is that our most vulnerable people, our senior citizens, and I'm a senior citizen, I would not want to meet somebody in a dark alley who was on drugs or whatever, okay? It'd be very upsetting. Now, just to give you an idea of how close quarters we're talking about, let's just imagine that this is the senior center right here. And right where you parked your car, right over there, is where all those people are going to be walking by the senior center at night, in the morning, and whatever. These seniors are vulnerable. They will be going out in that little small plot that they have in the back. They'll be walking around, and again, homeless people, they're not all bad, but a lot of people are homeless for a reason, and some of the reasons are substance abuse. And to put our most vulnerable people next to people who might harm them is a travesty. And I will say that our judicial system is based on what a reasonable person would do. That's what they do in the court. They go, what would a reasonable person do in this situation? Okay, a reasonable person, I don't think, would take a homeless shelter and put it right next to the most vulnerable other than our children. I just don't think that they would do that. I have just one closing thing. I just want to say that I would not want my mother, my father, or myself located so close to people who might be able to do such harm.
Hi, I'm Kathy Hoyt. I have been a volunteer at the Adult Day Health Care Center and Senior Rec Center for almost 20 years now. And I live in Park Lawn, for what that's got to do with this. I have a list of questions about the 2232 that I have sent to the county and got no response. to, so we'll try again. You talked about modifying the daily schedule at the homeless shelter so that they can stay all day. The 2232 says you have a pilot program starting at Bailey's that started in early May. What are the results of that pilot program? My observation, and sitting up there and watching, is that now the residents just kind of go out and wander around the local neighborhood. There were 4 of them sitting on the curb at the convenience store, which I have never seen before because they had to go away for the whole day and couldn't go back. Now they can go there if they need to go to the bathroom or whatever. They just kind of hang around the neighborhood. Can anyone address that pilot program?
Ms. Hoyt, yes, we did start piloting based on suggestions from the community, allowing people to stay on site at the shelter. It is still too early to say what the results are of that test. We're going to continue to be adapting it as we move along. I think moving forward, if this goes forward to the temporary location, there would certainly be less temptation to loiter when there's not vacant lots. But we're going to be continuing to test and pilot and adopt our...
So you have no results?
Well, no. I mean, basically, we're still piloting.
Okay. It's been 6 weeks. The 2232 says the proposed relocation will have no impact on the usability of the existing senior center, which seems to be at odds with the security assessment, which basically does lock down the senior center. And so I'm assuming from the remarks tonight, we're not implementing the recommendations in the security assessment? Nobody wants to talk to that. Okay. Let's see. States the site lighting will be designed to provide security and comply with zoning. Does that mean there will be no light pollution to adjoining residential neighborhoods? There will be no light pollution? That's not the question.
Any new development would... It would conform with the zoning ordinance just as any new development would have to.
I'll elaborate.
Ms. Hoyt, I can elaborate a little bit.
Okay, good.
So the site lighting is part of our site plan, and one of the things that we do is photometric studies, which show the foot candles, and we're very sensitive to the fact that the foot candles must be reduced at the lot lines. So it is something that we do. It is something that we study in order to conform with not only energy codes, but also the zoning.
So the fact that these lights are going to shine into the bedroom windows of the people in Charleston Square is not a concern?
We'll take efforts to avoid that, as well as we have the landscape buffers. So, okay.
Thank you.
That's 3. Kathy, that's time. If you have one last question.
Well, I'd like to make a statement to the committee, Mr. Chairman. I'm not, can you hear me? Okay. Yeah. That you said that your only choice is to evaluate this as it relates to the comprehensive plan. And I would point out that you have another choice. You can refuse to act on this and join this community, your community, in sending a message to the Planning Commission that this is wrong, it's wrong for this commission. I know then the Planning Commission will take it up anyway, but they will know that they will have to force it on this community.
Right.
And we need to send a message to the county that the homeless people deserve a permanent and appropriately located facility.
Okay, we're just about, I think, at 9 o'clock, so if there's anybody that is going to want to speak, please get in line now so that we can budget accordingly the time. So if you're not in line after this next speaker, you're probably not going to speak. Okay, thanks.
Good evening. My name is Aaron Franz. I'm a Lincolnia resident, and my father-in-law also attends the adult day health at Lincolnia Senior Center. Just as a follow-up to the crime statistics earlier, I'd say that I was hoping for maybe a little more enlightenment from the county with regards to what they could provide us. My concern is when they start providing data at the sub-census level, it's an area that's so large as not to be useful to try to isolate the effects of the homeless shelter on the community. For example, the sub-census area that they listed for Lincolnia is bounded by Columbia Pike, Lincolnia Road, and Little River Turnpike. So it is a pretty decent-sized piece of land to try to draw conclusions from, especially given some of the densities that you see there. So I would have hoped for something, I think, a little more targeted to try to get better information there. Additionally, I would just like to say that I know that there's been a lot of probably strong opinions regarding this, and I know that a lot of it sometimes comes across as maybe being anti-homeless, but I just want to say that we can disagree with the county's plans and still be pro-homeless. I think that sometimes I'm kind of disappointed in the words that I hear coming back from the county kind of impugning our character, when really what we're trying to do is hold the county accountable. That's all I have to say.
Thank you.
My name is Lisa Mankowski. I'm a resident of one of the many residential areas that's highly impacted by this proposed homeless shelter. I hope I misinterpreted what one of the first county speakers said tonight, which seemed to imply that because this is a public use, it would fit with the comprehensive plan. Of course, it's not such a simple issue, and there wouldn't be so many meetings and this level of discussion about this proposal if it was that simple. There are a number of adverse effects which have been mentioned at various meetings, some of which it sounds like are trying to be responded to, but many of which remain completely unresponded to, and that's the problem with this proposal. The many adverse effects include the terrible traffic at that very location. There's been a discussion of the vulnerable populations, in particular the seniors at the senior center, but let's not forget the vulnerable population of the children in the many neighborhoods surrounding that area, the several schools. Let's also not forget the fact that there are 2 alcohol retailers in close proximity to this homeless population that many of which have substance abuse problems. I share what's been said by many of the speakers today, that there is a desire to provide an appropriate solution for homeless people, and there is a current shelter for these people at Bailey's Crossroads. The next step should be a permanent shelter. It makes no sense to have a temporary solution that causes so many problems. I noted in your opening remarks and in these prepared, in the transcript of your opening remarks that were handed out, it said that tonight's meeting is not to discuss whether this is a good idea and whether there is a better location. So I would ask you to please explain where and when will be the time and place where the county will address whether this is a good idea and whether there are better locations, because that is obviously, if not the most important issue, certainly a crucial one.
Thank you very much, and thanks to the members of the Land Use Committee for this opportunity. My name is Mike Blaine. I'm a 15-year member, a resident of Fairfax County, and I've lived in Stonegate Landmark for 15 years. I've got 3 questions, 3 specific questions, because I got kind of lost in the data, as many of you did. So for Captain Quinn, a pretty simple question, and I got the 3 questions, and you guys can answer them at your convenience. But we're putting the homeless shelter behind Lincolnia Senior Center. make your police work, your policing of our district, particularly in terms of traffic, and particularly in terms of drug and alcohol crime, will it make your police work easier or more difficult putting it there? That's one question. For the board themselves, regarding the 2232, I find it curious that the 2232 pretty much ignores the 5 principal recommendations of the Lincolnia district in terms of what to do with the area. And it ignores multiple specific recommendations. For example, any construction in the Lincolnia Planning District should include traffic mitigation. There's no traffic mitigation that's even been discussed, nothing. Anything in this district, any construction in the Lincolnia Planning District should, because of the geology, particularly in this little section of Fairfax County, we feed the aquifer directly. And the comprehensive plan, the Fairfax County Comprehensive Plan says any construction in this area could compromise the water quality. But that's being ignored. So I don't understand why the Fairfax County Comprehensive Plan doesn't have to answer the specific recommendations for the Lincolnia Planning District. That baffles me. The third question, the Lincolnia Senior Center is on the extreme edge of Fairfax County. You couldn't get more on the edge, because you go right across the street and you're in the city of Alexandria. Wouldn't it be more convenient to the homeless if this homeless shelter, a permanent, not temporary homeless shelter, but a permanent homeless shelter, was put in the middle of Fairfax County, placed on the edge? And finally, there was a statement early on that this process has been very transparent. I object vehemently. Fairfax County hid this. The only reason we knew about it was one of our residents, one of our neighbors, saw mention of it on the Fairfax County website. When we asked Penny Gross on the 11th April meeting why the neighborhood, us, weren't informed, she told us, I don't have your email addresses. But it's curious that when you want to bill us for taxes, you find us with great accuracy. So I kind of think this has been hidden because, as we said, the Alexandria folks don't know anything about it. The city of Alexandria folks know very little about it. The police didn't know, at least when this process began.
Okay, Mike, that's it.
That's it?
Time's up.
Okay, well, thank you. And it is a waste of money and an abuse of the seniors.
Hold on one second. Captain Quinn, do you want to address whether it is any more difficult to police that area of the...
Actually, I'll address a couple things within that context and try to keep it brief in the interest of your time. With respect to the proposed location being at the cusp of Fairfax County, that does pose, that is a factor, and I'll discuss that very quickly. One is, our district is divided up into 5 police service areas. The current location is not central in the district, but it's central to 3 police service areas, meaning you've got Columbia Pike running up and down, so by mere happenstance, you've got what I would term incidental patrolling. You've got cops driving up and down Columbia Pike because they're going to the area of the shelter, the patrol area across the way, and the area that is pretty much comprises like the Route 7 corridor, whereas where it's going is, we're typically not, we patrol that area. Obviously, we make a lot of cases in Landmark, we make a lot of traffic stops on 236, we work a lot of crashes down there, so it's not like they're not getting police service, you're just not getting as a regular flow of units coming through there. And then with respect to one of the comments just made, and this is less pertaining to the nuts and bolts of policing, folks feeling as though that sentiment that they're anti-homeless or anti-program, I just want to say on behalf of the police department, we're here for you. I understand that, I could have done a lot of other things in this life, and I went into policing because I understand that people want to feel, one, safe in their community. They want to have some sense of tranquility, and I understand the unknown can be very scary. So just bear in mind that we're not going anywhere. Whatever comes to pass, You will have access to us, and we will formulate strategies, and we will work with county partners, and we will look at, what do we see at the current location, what are we likely to see at the other location, and we will implement any strategy that we can to try to offset negative impact if there is to be any. I recognize that some of the data presented to you, like even when I sit here and listen to all that, it becomes a bit of a haze. The fact of the matter is yes, we don't capture things necessarily by, are you specifically coming from there? Are you specifically going from there? Are you making you're making your report here, but did it happen here? We do capture a lot of that, but without going through and parsing report by report by report, which is a really cumbersome task. I understand the interest in that, but just looking at snapshots, more recently, we have issues with alcohol down there. Is it directly attributable to shelter? That's sort of a leap of conclusion without looking into every single one of those reports. Are we going to see that problem where the new shelter is going to be located? Whatever comes, we will contend with that as your police department, and we will meet with you ahead of time and look at what strategies are in place to help you feel safer in your own community.
Are you going to get out of your cruisers and walk behind the senior center? Because that will be an open field now, that one little piece they have left.
When the time comes, he'll discuss it. Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity. And I would like to talk from my heart about two things. One is passion for the homelessness. My faith dictates that I never know what happens tomorrow. A simple car accident, anything can happen that takes away the tranquility I may have today. So, homelessness in by itself is not a crime, and the homeless should not be treated as such. It may be 3 months, 4 months, but down the road, given the economy situation now, how many of us really can safely say we are not going to face that? I take that on. I understand that. I get it. And if not directly, someone we know have been affected with what affects the homeless. But when it comes to this issue, I live in Stonegate community. If it was the only thing affected was value of the property, I would have said, okay, it's worth, so be it. What does it matter? But the two things I consider. Number one, that's not a fit place for the homeless themselves. That bothers me a lot. When I see the crosswalk in there, it's as crowded as it can be. For me to walk across to the shopping center, even when I am not drunk, I have been at work, it's a problematic place. Number two, okay, the people who are inside, you can secure them. But what about when overflow? What about when they don't want to get in it? What are they going to go? To my neighborhood. And the problem is the impact side of it that was not discussed properly is, yes, we have dedicated police I can call, but it's too late. 3 minutes, 5 minutes is too late. If my daughter has been attacked or scared, my wife has been attacked, scared, or myself. If any one of you have been in a car accident, the impact that leaves you for a long time is not good. So once the incident happens, it's not good. And we are only 50, 100 yards away from it. Number two, there are a lot of alcohol selling stores in there, which for me, it doesn't match with what we are trying to do. So I just want to bring to your attention, it's not a matter of we don't want them in our backyard. It's not convenient. It's not good for them. It's not helpful in every aspect you can consider. If that was the situation, if the place was fit for them, I would have gone whatever other property values that comes along with it.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening. I'm Mary Lee DeSpirito, and I've been associated with caring for the homeless for probably about 38 years and lived in Fairfax County for 40. long before the shelter was ever built. But there are a couple of things that I have not heard about tonight and at other meetings. You may not be aware that the shelter does more than just shelter homeless people. The Food Providers Network, specifically the Food for Others group, that is a drop point for food. We have people coming from the Oakview Gardens apartments and other places in that Colmore-Bailey's area needing food, and their volunteers bring that food in about 3 times a week. And that is the distribution point. We care for the elderly out of the shelter because there is a Meals on Wheels program. The caterer brings the food to the shelter. The drivers pick it up there and make the distribution in an area around that shelter. The shelter is doing more than just address the homeless. They're caring for some very special people in our community that need help, that need compassion. I might tell you that in my own household, we have had a gentleman that my husband would see out walking on the street, bring him home, get him a shower. He was about the size of my husband. He was a resident of the Bailey shelter at one point, and then we were able to get him permanent housing. There was a total transformation in that gentleman, and when he died, he was given full honors at Arlington Cemetery. So I'm in and out of the shelter on a very regular basis. I also am associated with a group that cooks the meal for the shelter as well as hypothermia throughout the last 25 years, and we do that every week, every month. So the shelter is really doing more than just sheltering the homeless. They are serving our community, and we need to be sure that that shelter is well protected so our citizens can have their needs met. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, I'm Mark Fraser. Last week, the MDLUC published an open letter summarizing the community objections to the proposed shelter relocation. That article pointed out that the county is treating the relocation strictly as a real estate transaction without any consideration whatsoever of the impacts or risks to the people involved. In fact, the proposed relocation is first and foremost all about people. That's all we've been talking about for the past half an hour. Key elements of our objections to the relocation are the risks and consequences to our contingent residents and the at-risk seniors and homeless. That open letter made it clear that nobody will benefit from this proposed relocation. And in fact, the crime data we're hearing tonight confirms that. Everyone will lose. You're transplanting a population and crime from an area and importing it into a new area. It's additive. We're going to be seeing more crime events against our seniors, against our children, against our against the residents. The county has been recklessly ignoring these risks and the very real long-term human cost of this project. But you, the members of the Land Use Committee, you don't have to ignore these risks. We urge you to exercise your freedom to vote your conscience in this matter and to not recommend this proposal, and send a strong message to our county leadership that they need to do what is right, what they should have done all along. They need to find a permanent shelter now. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Mary Ann. I'm very nervous. I'm a product of the Fairfax County shelters, and I feel like everybody's talking about homeless people like they're animals, you know?
No.
This is what I'm hearing. I'm hearing a lot of snickering in the back, all this laughing and everything. You talk about knitting classes, and everybody's like laughing. This year, I was at a church, and it was in Facet's hypo shelter, and one of the clients, one of the women, was looking at some yarn, and I was looking at her, and she had a big smile on her face. And she's somebody that I don't, it's hard to engage with her. She's been living on the streets for quite a few years. And I said, do you like to knit? And she smiled, and I said, do you crochet? And she said, yeah. And I said, I'll bring some needles tomorrow. And I brought crocheting needles, and she, of course she couldn't carry the yarn. So I gave her one skein of yarn, and I have it in my trunk now. And she was, she was knitting a little bit or crocheting a little bit. And most of the yarn is still in my trunk, but it gave her a little pleasure for a little while. When I was in the shelter, I was volunteering and was offered a job at the South County Adult Senior Center when it was on Route 1. And I volunteered there for 1.5 years, and I was offered a job there. It was a little too stressful for me. I did it for 6 months as a part-time and was offered the job, and it was a little too stressful. So I'm now working with the county as a peer support, and I'm in Bailey's shelter 1 night a week, trying to hook people up with, engage them and hook them up with services, mental health and drug and alcohol services. So, there is a future. Everyone, who knows who's not a paycheck or two away from being homeless in Fairfax County? This is the county, one of the richest counties in the world, and we could lose our jobs tomorrow. And, most of what I hear is people are living paycheck to paycheck around here, And a lot of the young people, they lose their jobs. A lot of people are losing their houses, and I'm seeing them here. I'm seeing people that I look up, and they're losing their houses, and they're ending up in the homeless shelter. And I look, and I'm seeing these people have degrees. And it wasn't long. It hasn't been long to take them down to the bottom. So that's all I have to say. I don't know where you're going to vote, how you're going to vote. I just know we need a shelter. Bailey's is falling apart. It's really falling apart. And them saying it's going to be temporary, this isn't what we want. We need a government center. No, this is what I'm telling you. We need a government center, not just a shelter. So the shelter is only part of this government center that we want to build. This isn't what we want.
Okay,
this is temporary.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Appreciate it.
Hello, thanks for having me. My name is Josh D'Antonio, and I'm a citizen. I also work for Facets. We work very closely with the Office to End and Prevent Homelessness, among many other organizations. And I want to tell you a little bit about my experience with the homeless population. I've worked for Facets for a while, and I've had the privilege, and I use privilege specifically because it has been a privilege, of getting to know the men and women who participate in our programs outside of a case management relationship. I chat with them almost every day. We talk about our lives, our families. We talk about things in the news. We talk about our struggles, our successes. My favorite part is, when we exchange jokes and we talk about our laughs that we've had. The men and women have, truly become my friends or my neighbors. I care deeply about them, and I see a great opportunity, with this shelter. The woman was saying, with the knitting groups and things like that, there's a lot of opportunities to build bridges and help both communities. So instead of calling them the homeless, labeling them, treating them as something that they're not, casting them aside yet again, let's call them what they are. Their mothers, their fathers, their brothers, their sisters. They really could be your children. And they're someone's children. They need a place to go. They're already really cast out by society, and the language used here, I don't want to live next to them. I don't want them near my children. It's appalling to me.
No one said that. No one said that at all.
No, they did not.
Where do you live?
You guys can look at that.
Where do you live?
Anyways.
Where do you live, Josh? He's got the floor. Come on.
So please stop treating them as less than people, because they are the same as you and me, genuinely. And we could be there tomorrow, no better, no worse. Thank you.
just really quickly, I think there's some confusion. No one's saying we should not provide a shelter for the homeless. What it comes down to is an appropriate location. Depends how quickly, but well, to distinguish that from what's going on here, the Lamb Center, 1, is a day shelter. 2, it was over 9% funded by private funds. 3, it's surrounded by auto repairs. I actually went there. It's a beautiful building. It has one area where it's residential behind it. And it is about an 8 to 10 foot fence, very solidly built, and you can see the apartments maybe 50 feet away. It is less than 50 yards off of Lee Highway. It is not in the backyard of a senior center. And it also was 4 years in the making. So perhaps if Fairfax County Board of Supervisors were to take the same time and consideration, we wouldn't be here tonight. So please don't compare this situation to the Lamb Center. I think if anyone was proposing that, we'd be giddy. With respect to how this comports with the Fairfax County's comprehensive plan, they have 208 pages on Bailey's Crossroads. They mentioned the Bailey's Crossroads Community Shelter, I believe, twice. They mentioned public facilities, schools, libraries, telecommunications. Nowhere there do they mention homeless shelters. Nowhere do they address the issue of the homeless in 208 pages of the Bailey's Crossroads community, of the Bailey Crossroads comprehensive plan. It doesn't seem like the comprehensive plan really gave that much consideration to the homeless. If you don't even address it, even when you're addressing the public facilities portion. So how it comports, I don't know, because the comprehensive plan is definitely silent about the homeless shelters. With respect to the Lincolnia plan, which, by the way, in case you want to know what the priorities are, the Bailey's comprehensive plan is 208 pages. Lincolnia is 37 pages. That shows you where you rank around here. So the Lincolnia plan, they actually specifically address the recreational center, and it's actually mentioned, I believe, maybe in the staff report that was dropped about a few days ago on us. They talk about that the recreational field should be used that, and they encourage that. But then when you read the staff report, it talks about the overview, the big broad picture, and apparently that trumps the specific treatment of this field. Now, if those of you, if you're familiar at all with, I don't know, statutes or contracts, you understand that the specific trumps the broad. Otherwise, there's no reason to have the specific. If the big picture trumps the little details, why bother with the little details? So you've got to ask, why do they stress the field, the recreational field behind the Lincolnia Senior Center, if it was just going to be trumped by the big overview?
Okay, thank you very much.
And I didn't get as much time as the lovely young lady who spoke about being homeless, by the way.
You got more.
Lois Steele, resident and senior. And I think mine flows from what was just discussed. In the midst of all the statistics and the comprehensive plan, what is the one thing I'm going to paint is a green picture. This is a green recreational space attached to the senior center. It's not huge. It's not a neglected field that's overrun. There's a walking path, and it serves many of the communities right around it. There are no other spaces there. We have an emphasis on green areas, on walking. There's a walking path there. Why would we take this? It's not acres and acres. It's about the size of a football field. And if you say, well, we're just taking part of it, why would you take part of it when we want green spaces and green recreational spaces attached to a senior center? The front of it faces a busy street. We have one green space serving those communities and providing a recreational area for the seniors and the other residents.
Thank you. Ma'am, you're going to be the last speaker tonight, okay? Because when I call for people to get in line, you're the last one, and it's past 9:30, so we're going to have...
I have a disability problem where I was not able to stand up here to the line, so I would really like to speak to this topic.
Did you let anybody know that?
No, I did not.
Okay. You're,
If you want us to consider a motion, we do need some time before they kick us out tonight.
So, please.
Good evening, my name is Maria Montevilla. We live in Lincolnia, Charleston Square. We live in for around 10 years, and I have 2 daughters. With all these plans that you already have as a commission, which I understand, you're trying to look it up for the protection of some other people they have a needs right now. But it's one point you did not consider it right now, is the protection of our kids, our seniors that are living around there. I'm pretty much sure that your own kids, they are protected wherever you live, but you're not thinking in the stop buses. They stop by the corner that I live at 6 a.m. in the morning and 7 a.m. in the morning, and they stop by 3 p.m. when they drop them. They walk home. So who's going to protect them? I'm working. I have to work because I have to pay my mortgage and I have to pay my taxes. So who's going to watch my kids? Who's going to receive them? Who's going to even my husband and myself in the morning when they stop pick up the kids, I have to stop myself on the street on Lincolnia Road, a meeting house way. I have to stop right there on the street to let them stop because it's not authorities, it's not police to check them if they're going to respect the signs. Do you think somebody's going to protect the homeless while the kids they're going to pick up by the bus? I don't think so. I may make many phone calls to the police and did not show up only one time. But every single morning, my dad is going to drop and pick up my kids from the school bus. Every morning at 7:15 from Park Low Elementary School, Glasgow Middle School, and on the high school. So now who's going to protect them? I would like to know that. Seniors, my parents, they use the only green area that we have behind the senior centers. That's the only green area that we have around there that we use for them. For healthy reasons, they walk, they jog. That's the only green area that you have. Why they taken away? Why is the reason? When you have many other options for you guys to look it up around, why you want to take away from us, from the families, from seniors? They have the only place you're trying to look it up that place for them. What are they going to do after? Who's going to watch them? That's all I can say. Thanks.
Hi, my name is Teresa Hardy, and first, Chairman, I would like to address you. The committee could have asked if there's anybody here with a disability that might need any assistance before the meeting had started. And first of all, I want to address the people that have been in shelters. It's not the point that people don't care about you in the shelter. It's a point that we have seniors that they're trying to put a temporary shelter in. I have been working with seniors for, 30 years. I've been a resident of Fairfax County for 58 years. My parents live here, my grandparents, my great-grandparents, and my great-great. I'm out right now on an injury. I was out for 5 years with a back injury. And I was out of income for 3 years with no income. So I understand what it means not to know what tomorrow is going to bring. But by the grace of God, yes, I've been back restored with my income. Number one is, I own 3 properties in Fairfax County, and I haven't heard anybody address, I don't know if anybody's here with the tax assessment office.
Everybody?
Well, a shelter being located in the area, the temporary location that you're trying to put it in, would that affect the value of my property? Yes. Would my property value go down with a shelter located there? It will.
It's, I don't know that there's any empirical data to support it, so, but it's not an issue for this specific meeting tonight.
Okay, and another thing is when it comes to seniors, I'm not for sure the young lady's name that addressed that you all would interact with the seniors and all that. Well, I've seen a lot of crimes with seniors that seniors get nervous when there's always a change coming in your environment anyway. I've had people have seniors as their best friends, that they made them their best friends, but end up the seniors have lost all of their money because they were either robbing them or whatever. My thing is, I'm not against a shelter, but my thing is, in the back door of a senior's place, when they're supposed to have quality of life no matter what age they're at. And at that time, when they get to that level, it's like they're more children all over again. And you can't say that you're going to have a shelter, people that's in a shelter for a temporary location to interact with those seniors. It's not a safe environment for them.
That's right.
So the only thing I'm asking you all to consider the area. I hope my taxes don't go, my property value don't go down. I hope my taxes don't go up. And protect the seniors if nothing else.
Okay, thank you very much.
One more word, just a very brief word.
So we really need the time. You spoke at the last meeting, I believe. You spoke at this meeting. Okay. Any other questions for any of the representatives that are here tonight?
I've got one follow-up question.
Okay.
So, question for someone hopefully from county staff. There was a comment made about the access to the proposed site. This is one of the questions I submitted in writing, and between the comment and the response back, I'm still unclear. The access to the site, I understand, is from the county, is through the senior center parking lot. Does the senior center parking lot have additional space for more cars? Second, where is the asphalt path that's referenced in the response from county? Third, I would like more details on the speaker's comments about that Shackelford Terrace is being considered in all this access, seeing as that really seems like a private road.
It is.
The parking lot to the Lincolnia Senior Center is, accessible from North Chambliss Street. There is an access. There is from Shackelford Terrace, which is the street through Stonegate at Landmark. There is a access point to the Lincolnia Senior Center parking lot. I think that was made because access to Shackelford Terrace from North Chambliss is right in, right out. So in order for them to go left, they would have to go through the Senior Center parking lot. So that's what that's about. I'm sorry, can you remind me of your other questions?
So let me just focus on Shackelford Terrace for a moment. Does and forgive me, it's in the staff report, and with everything that I've read that I've missed it, but does the staff report consider appropriate ingress to the senior center and or the proposed homeless shelter include access via Shackelford Terrace?
According to the report, it does.
I mean, no, that's not access to the senior centers from North Chambliss. The reason the access from Shackelford Terrace exists because they can only go right in, right out from North Chambliss. In order for them to go left, they can use the senior center parking lot.
Understood. Second question is, in the Parade of Wonderfuls, does the senior center parking lot anticipate people parking there to solely use the field behind it? I mean, what was so there was ostensibly a parking plan for the senior center when that was approved, and did that parking plan include access to the field behind it?
I'm not sure about when the senior center was approved back in '87.
Are you concerned whether there's a pass-through or the actual parking
Well, I'm concerned about access, and then the follow-on, the other question that I asked was, in the follow-up to the written questions was there was also reference to an asphalt path, which, despite my zooming in on Google Maps, I'm struggling to see.
Is that the asphalt path from Stonegate at Landmark to the field?
It's in the back.
Wyland Homes put that asphalt path in when they built Stonegate and Landmark.
It's on the map.
Yeah, you can see it. You can see it right here.
It's that path that goes.
See it?
Just Stone Gate? Oh, yeah, all right, I got
All the way
it.
around.
Got it, thank you.
The green area.
Thank you, I'm good.
Okay, any other follow-up questions for anybody? All right, is there a motion tonight?
I'm ready to recommend the approval.
I
second
it.
That's not being asked.
What is your motion?
A motion to approve the proposal for the 2233, Plan 16 by 22, as it's stated for the committee to consider.
Okay. Okay, so we have a motion to approve the county's, recommend approval of the county's application for the 2232. It's been seconded. Any discussion?
Yes, please.
Steve.
So I've been reminded on numerous occasions, including tonight, that whether this application is in substantial accord with the area's comprehensive plan. So just think in generally, from last month to today, about is this good land use? Transition. Land use 101, I'm concerned about the transition. It's heavy residential already. Does it, and we're going to add a very dense usage, so that's concerning. Land use 101, traffic. I remember vividly your predecessor, your previous chairman, talking about this being, according to the Washington Post, the single worst intersection, speaking of North Beauregard and Little River Turnpike, in the metro area. So I have a concern about added density as poor land use. While some people did speak about the open space in the field, it was very clear to me that there is an entire constituency that did not speak tonight. There was not one person under the age of 18. And we just gobble up open space after open space in this county. And, it's happened in my neighborhood, and it's ridiculous. Where the single last field is rezoned to a different purpose. This is, you just look, it was very clear from the comments last month, with the 1 mile radius that one speaker talked about. But you look at Google Maps, it's just like, where do you want kids to play? You got to get them somewhere. Then we go to the comprehensive plan, which, as you all know from Monticello Muse, I said it's a North Star document. And in lieu of on-site recreational facilities, that's the first statement, on-site recreational facilities. And what are we going to do? We're going to blow away 60% of it if this is approved. I look at what's left of what 60% is. It's roughly 3 townhomes wide by 1 deep. You can't do much with 3 townhomes wide by 1 deep. So I strenuously think that this is not the site for it. I don't want to pause because next month you'll be booing me. But because it's a different issue. But seriously, we need, we are a county. We are not Tyson's Corner. I know bad analogy is part of the county, but we are not Tyson's Corner. Mason Districts is not Tyson's Corner. We should not be looking to infill every single acre, every single square foot. So I'm opposed.
So, I've read the 2232, and and it says that it basically meets all the criteria, and I understand how Fairfax County has come to that, the staff has come to that conclusion. What I don't understand is, and what bothers me, and I don't know if anyone from Fairfax County can address it, but this thing has just gone at the speed of heat. It's, what I'm trying to understand, and especially if there's no penalty on the March 2017, if that's the case, what is driving, such, the urgency of this? I have seen over and over again, and I will tell you, the March Center burns in my mind
and the ramifications of the Mark Center and all the things of everyone moving at the speed of heat because they know what needs to be done and it's got to be done now, and they don't have time for reason, thought to understand it. So I don't know if anyone from Fairfax County can explain why this came out of nowhere, then that would help me make the decision. But otherwise, to me, if the county's going to meet and make that decision next month, it ought to be a difficult decision. I mean, I struggle with that. So is there anyone who can explain to me where this came from, what the urgency of it, and how it came out of nowhere?
Thank you again, Tracy Strunk with the Office of Community Revitalization. I'll try. It is a difficult timing juggling. There's more than one piece. Everyone knows that this is the current shelter location is in the area in Bailey's Crossroads that the county's been working on for probably longer than I've been working with the county to try and revitalize that area. It's an area that has some issues, and there's some large semi-industrial land that has been basically vacant or close to vacant, and there's some less than great uses that are on there. So there's been a long term, there have been a lot of projects that have come in over the years and they're not going anywhere. The project that is under proposal now, which is the Avalon Bay project people have mentioned, is a good developer. It's someone that we want to see come into that part of the county. And they, like any developer, have, there's market conditions that will change what they can do, what they can propose to do, and what they can afford to do today is not necessarily going to be the same that they can afford to do tomorrow. They are a company that self-finances. They don't go out and get financing, so they have an investment company that, and I won't speak for them, but they look very carefully about how much time it's taking for them to do a particular project, what's the cost benefit, what costs are they putting in. So there are, it's not necessarily that there's a $1,500 a day penalty that happens in March whether we do anything or not. There is a sales contract that would have to go forward that's contingent upon a rezoning, and there's a lot of other factors. But there are real timing issues. There were several versions. I know I'm jumping around a little bit, but there's kind of a bunch of different moving pieces with that. There were several versions of the Avalon Bay proposal. At one point, the schools were interested in part of that property for a school location. And for a variety of reasons, they didn't move forward. If that version had gone forward, the development would have been on the other side of the property, and the shelter location would have stayed there a little until they needed it for school, basically. And so that's some of what happened with the timing, was that 2 years ago, frankly, the shelter did not need to move to accommodate the redevelopment. And as things changed over the last couple of years, that changed. So it's not a situation we'd like to be in, but it is the truth of just kind of trying to explain to you where we are and where we come from and sort of how we've ended up here today. It has been quick. It hasn't been as much time as we would have liked to have. I think we're always balancing. There's always a first meeting for every proposal that we have to have, and people always want to know why they didn't go sooner. I don't know, frankly, on this location that we could have come out any sooner with where we're here. We've given it as much time as we thought we could with that. So I'm not sure if that fully answers your question, but that's sort of the background on where we are. It's the redevelopment of the site in Bailey's overall is going to be a huge benefit for the county. I mean, the value of the cost of, and all of the cost of variously of putting together that project will be well outweighed by the value that's created by the redevelopment and the hopefully the God, I can't think of the word right now, but the seed nature of having a project like that in that area. So it's the value that's created on the property. It's also the value that will create, will throw off to the surrounding area. So Hopefully that answers your question some. It may not entirely answer it, but.
Okay, thank you.
So the developers need the homeless need. Got it.
I'm in a dilemma.
Okay.
Okay, I have a lot of heartburn with all of this. These people have made some very good arguments, a lot of which I think have merit, a lot that I can discount. But what is our vote on? I mean, when I get it from the statements, it's not that we're voting on whether this is a good location for it, whether, the time frame being so fast bothers me. The news of a shelter bothers me. So what is our focus with this vote we're asked to take? Can you help me get somewhere?
I can. Actually, I do want to ask one last question myself.
David or Chris, can you address the one question that did come up a couple times in connection with how the public use aspect of the comprehensive plan, seemed to carry more weight than, the idealistic recreational use and to have those kind of things in the area?
Can you put in idealistic?
Yeah.
The point that you raised about when, I think when the senior center was put in, they said in lieu of having the green space with the senior center, they were counting this lot?
No, it was the stone gate.
Okay, the stone gate, but, so it seemed like they were saying this green space is part of the agreement and that we assume it's going to be green space, and now that seems to be ignored.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you.
I think those both can be answered.
Forever.
The fact that 40% of it still will remain a green space, granted, I grant it's reduced, that does not conflict with the comprehensive plan.
Okay, baloney. Okay.
And in terms of the the proffers were satisfied. The Lincolnia Senior Center isn't governed by the proffers, which is in the staff report.
So I'll just say, I'll bring up an application we had a couple of years ago. Somewhere, someone said a cell phone tower, so I guess it's some lobbyist probably, said a cell phone tower is not a commercial use and therefore it could be, 500 feet beside someone's house. I'm not a political appointee, but, I'm going to call a spade a spade. You take that green space and you narrow it down to 3 townhomes wide by 1 deep, and that's no longer green space. That's someone's front yard for what is much of the county. It's not a field for the surrounding community. And going back to the comprehensive plan, which county staff cited page 18, paragraph 5, in order to better utilize and maintain this existing community recreational resource, period. So on that, I say it's not in comportment with the comprehensive plan. It's not in comportment with the North Star that we should be following.
Thank you, Dave.
All right, so Pam, to help you here, the application, the county has chosen this site to file this 2232 application on in connection with the temporary relocation of the homeless facility. County staff in the planning department has reviewed their application and decided that based on the location, character, and extent of their proposal, it does conform to the comprehensive plan. Our recommendation to Commissioner Stranley will be that we either concur or we don't concur with the application. When she goes to the Planning Commission, it's essentially going to be the same type of analysis that they're going to do. So, the question for us is, in the very narrow scope, because we're only dealing with the land use issue, not the homeless issue, not the open space issue, but whether or not the application as proposed with the elements indicated that, substantially conforms to the comprehensive plan.
Does that help?
Well, we've gone through the list. They checked off, everything's been checked off. It's an application for use. That we don't have anything input. All we're doing is passing it on to the committees that do. They don't have to listen to us one way or another. And my questions were answered. I understand there's two different ways. I'd love to sit there and think we could get them to guarantee that in 3.5 years, the brand new center will be open somewhere that we have yet to be determined, but that's not realistic. The Bailey Center is failing. They're holding it together. It needs to be either massively renovated.
It's not true. Fine. I've been there. It's fine.
Right. But for what we have to concentrate on and what we're dealing with tonight, I feel comfortable with what the application meets what we need to vote on.
Yeah, where do you live? Live there? All right.
Anyone else have any questions? Pam, are you still?
Do the right thing, do like that. Please do the right thing.
All right. Let's go ahead and, it's 10 o'clock, so let's go ahead and vote and see how it goes. I'm going to restate the motion, yes. The motion is to recommend the county's application to Commissioner Stranley for approval at the Planning Commission. All right, I'll just go around the room. Jim? No. Doug?
Yes.
Roberto?
Yes.
Yes. Barry?
No.
Steve?
No.
Sherry?
No.
Pam?
No.
No.